Thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yes, and I know you and I have been acquainted for a number of years.
Yes.
But I'm going to take this opportunity today to dig down a little bit deeper and learn even more about you.
That sounds great.
Obviously, you are the editor-in-chief of Home and Design magazine, arguably likely one of the most prominent and prolific magazines in the shelter industry in the Mid-Atlantic region, right?
Thank you.
Which is a lot to take on. But what I want to do is I want to dial back a little bit and ask you about your childhood and start there. So tell me a little bit about how you were when you graduated high school. Like, what were your strengths? What did you know were your abilities? And what were the things that brought you joy during that time?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Maryland, so I'm a local of the DC area. And I always knew that I loved to write. And in high school, I think I ended up joining the school paper. You know, I always kind of envied the people in the theater side of things. And they had such a community where they all worked on a big project together and everyone had their role and came together. And I sort of found that I wasn't an actor or singer for sure, but I found that in the journalism department. And we had this really wonderful, very tough teacher who came from Newsweek magazine. Her name was Lois Kay, and she was a tough cookie, but I became the news editor of the paper. And I think I realized then that I was very curious. I was a good listener. I mean, those were all kind of qualities that I think that I use today. And also that I love to be part of something that's bigger, that you kind of need many roles and a lot of collaboration to produce something, whether it's a play or an issue of a magazine or a newspaper.
So then when you talk about your love for writing, was it both nonfiction and fiction, or did you know even at that time, no, I want to immerse myself into nonfiction and learn more about things and people?
Right. I think I had an affinity for storytelling of true things, not necessarily fiction. So I tried in my hand at fiction a few times and it just didn't feel genuine. So I was more about, and I feel like the real world has plenty to write about that's true.
No doubt.
So that sort of was my focus. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So then from high school, then you're off to Syracuse majoring in
magazine journalism. So I was attracted to the program. It's a good journalism school, but it had one of the few devoted magazine programs at the time. So I think, having been on my school paper, I was really attracted to magazine where you can be a little bit more creative and tell more of a full story. And I don't think I wanted to go into news writing. So I thought like the magazine feature was more for me.
Did you also feel like the opportunity to not only involve yourself in writing, but also the pictorials that magazines offers? Did you feel like there was a draw to that too?
I think so. I think I've always been a visual person. I've always loved photography. I remember during college, I studied abroad and I took a photography class. So this was before digital. So I was like in the dark room learning, a lot of the aspects of photography. So I've always been attracted to good design. And I love now working with our art directors and photographers to kind of tell that story.
Okay. So you were just mentioning photography. So going back to high school and college, besides writing, were there other things in your life that brought you joy or other extracurricular activities that you just loved to immerse yourself in?
Right. I loved hanging out with my friends and family and, going to the beach and doing a lot of just the regular kid things growing up. So I loved to play tennis, be outdoors, go to the beach. I loved to travel, and that, I ended up at a travel magazine. So I think those were the things
I want to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think those were the things that brought me the most joy. Yeah.
Okay. So now then we're fast forwarding, like going down this little path of yours.
Right.
So tell me, like, what happened after college that was in the course that took you to where you are today?
Well, it's been a pretty straight path, but after I graduated from college, I sort of thought I'd end up in New York City. I was at a New York school, and that's where all the magazines are. But my dad had actually heard about a new magazine starting out in the DC area called Caribbean Travel and Life. So I applied and
Wait a minute. Caribbean Travel and Life is starting out in the DC area? Like, what is that?
Of all things. So it was started by an entrepreneur who had lived in St. Martin for a while, but was from from Alexandria, I think. So he started
Alexandria, Virginia.
So he started it in Old Town in this tiny little office on top of a law office in Old Town. And we were 3 people. So it was my first job out of college, but I got to write and travel from the very start and work with this phenomenally talented editor and mentor, her name Veronica Stoddart. So I was able to learn so much. So I was very, very lucky to land this job. So I never did the New York thing, but got this opportunity to travel and write from the very beginning. So I spent more than 10 years there because there was no reason to leave. And I got to go on all these wonderful, all expenses paid trips to the Caribbean. And I wrote about the travel and the hotels, but I also wrote about the culture, the food, the music, the history, the architecture. So it was this wonderful sort of immersion into how to be a real generalist as far as an editor and writer goes.
Right.
So that was a wonderful, and I met my husband in Curacao who was living there at the time.
Well, that's just an extra bonus, right?
Right, and that was a very big surprise. So it all worked out really well. And if you had told me in high school that would have been my path, I would have said, no way, that's sounds like a dream.
So one of the things that you mentioned earlier, because I do want to talk to you a little bit more about the travel and your experiences there, but you said that you were lucky to land that job. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that preparation marries itself with luck, right? Mm-hmm. To get you to where you want to be. Mm-hmm. So what do you think that company was looking for when they hired you? Mm-hmm. Like, what kind of skills did you think that you had that was attractive to them?
Right. Well, that's a good question. I think, I had written for anybody and anyone who would, accept my work. So during college, I wrote for all the campus publications. I think during the summers, I freelanced for some of the little local papers. So I had a lot of clips, and I think I showed, I guess the ability to do the work and also a versatility. And I think that helped a lot. But I think it was also a lot of luck and timing. So that
didn't hurt. Mm-hmm. So what do you think you were looking for? I mean, you just said, okay, you were just going to offer your work to anybody who would take it.
Right.
But when you took that job, what were you looking for in that company at that time?
I thought it was a great opportunity to join something that was a startup, so that it didn't have the security of going to some big publishing company. Mm-hmm. Back in those days, there was security with those things. Mm-hmm. And so it was a bit of a risk because, it wasn't really well funded at the beginning, but I just thought the idea to go, I love travel, I love the islands. Mm-hmm. It was just this opportunity to have some adventure. And I just thought this, that it was kind of definitely something I would pursue.
Yeah. And free travel doesn't hurt, right?
Right.
Okay, so now you're going to all of these islands, mm-hmm. and you mentioned that you're enjoying the culture and mm-hmm. the architecture. Mm-hmm. Are there any islands or locations that you went to that stand out to you, that mm-hmm. just you were just like, oh my gosh, in a state of euphoria or just splendor?
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, there's so many, and I loved all of them. I loved St. Lucia and Grenada. They're these lush volcanic islands with untouched tropical rainforests, and, their tourism product is developed, but it's not as commercialized as a lot of the more touristy islands, especially at that time. Mm-hmm. And I love just learning about the culture and the cuisine and the music, and those were 2 of my favorites for sure.
And how would you articulate the culture is different than what we see here in the States? Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting. The Caribbean is such an amalgam of cultures. You have the European settlers, and then, the horrible years of the slave trade that brought people from Africa, mm-hmm. also from India and China. So the islands are a real melting pot today. Mm-hmm. In those particular islands, people speak a patois that might be related to French. Some of the cuisine is related to French or Indian. They eat roti, that are these wonderful pancakes with like a curry inside that people from India brought. So, the music is this wonderful amalgam. So it's a wonderful cultural experience. And looking back, I also, I wanted to tell the story of the islands, not just from the point of view of them being wonderful playgrounds, but for the history of what happened there too. So I think that's important also.
Yeah. And how receptive, because this is interesting to me, you weren't just talking about just travel, like this restaurant, this food. You were interested in also articulating and sharing the history and the culture, right? How receptive was your magazine to letting you tell that kind of story?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they were receptive. I think that this was a while ago, but I think we still were, very much reckoning with the history that happened in a lot of the islands. I did a story on plantation houses and how they were used and how they are being used today and repurposed and commemorating and remembering, what had gone on before. So I think we were trying to be responsible about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great because, in my opinion, I believe the more that we expose ourselves to other people from diverse backgrounds, then the more likely we are to grow, right? And to also feel as if we are bonded together in one way or the other, and then we're less likely to discriminate, to be racist, right? Because we know that these people have similarities to us and we understand, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. Okay, so then fast forwarding, right? Now, how are you getting from there to Home and Design magazine?
So Caribbean Travel was sold to a company in Florida. And I was about to have our second child at the time. And so none of us went down to Florida. So I started freelancing for a few years. And Todd Herbers, our publisher, had bought Home and Design, and an art director who had designed the original Caribbean Travel and Life templates and was a wonderful friend of ours, John Isley, recommended me to Todd, that we had this mutual friend. So he gave me a call, and my first instinct was, to be honest, I'm not a designer. I love design, but I don't know how to be a shelter magazine editor. And my husband Noah gave me a nice little gentle push and said, at least talk to him. Like, what have you got to lose? You have a wonderful experience. So I met with Todd, and lo and behold, he offered me the position.
So this is what I think is so interesting about this, is I was talking to, I think my sister about this yesterday, is that, women have the tendency to go, oh no, I'm not fully qualified for that, so I'm not even going to put my hat in the ring.
Right.
Whereas men are like, I'm 10% qualified, my hat is going in, right?
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. And I had that exactly. I had that experience exactly.
Yeah, so it's like, you kind of have to jump on faith, right? And then just see what happens. And then let them make the decision as to whether or not they think that you're prepared, right? To do the work.
Right. So, yeah, and I'm grateful for him for giving me that push. And I realized that I got this and I could do it. And it's been a wonderful learning experience and opportunity ever since.
So tell me what your day-to-day life looks like when you're, you get up in the morning, you're going to work. What are you doing when you go to work?
Right. Well, every day is different, and I think that's part of the reason I love it. And it sort of depends if we're at the beginning or the end of a production cycle for an issue. So at the beginning, I'm doing a lot of planning, looking at projects online, going out and visiting and scouting projects. We have a lot of planning meetings. And then once we decide what we're covering, I assign articles to writers, and we work on the layout. So we might be having a layout review with our art director and talking about how to best tell the story of a project. Later in the cycle, I'm doing my own interviewing and writing. So I might spend a day or two just focusing on writing a feature, which takes a lot of time, and interviewing all the people involved and touring the homes. Later,
I think it's really cool also that in your position, and this may be by design, you'll have to tell me, that you actually still write, right? Going back to the thing that gave you the most gratification in your high school years, because sometimes when you're a leader in whatever organization, the thing that got you there is something you can't do anymore because you're busy being the visionary and leading people, right? So is that also by design, that you're making sure that you are tapping into that thing that gave you joy from the onset?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I do. I love to take a deep dive into a project and learn kind of what makes people tick and tell the story. So I don't have to write a story in every issue, but I definitely do, and I definitely want to. And I think I don't want to give that up.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so I'm going to tell you a secret.
Sure.
All right, so, to be a good designer, one has to observe people and study their essence. So I may or may not have stalked you.
Right. Okay.
And I've observed you, right, over time. So one thing I think is so interesting about you and why I wanted to talk to you today is because you are always this calm force. What I know is that if you're working at this magazine, you're amidst deadlines all the time.
Right.
Like the pressure is hitting you all the time. But every time I see you, you are just a steady person. And the reason why I think that that's interesting is because some people feel like to be a great leader, you have to be loud, you have to be boisterous to be able to motivate people. But I also have observed that your team has been with you for a very long time. Like you've been in that position for over 20 years. And your turnover is so low. Like I see the same folks who were there 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they're still there. So this ability that you have to be this calm force as a leader, first of all, is awesome.
Thank you.
But does that come from or emanate from some place that's just within you, or is it something that you're intentional about?
I think it's a little bit of both. I do have kind of a calm demeanor, and I think one of my daughters told me I lead with kindness. I find I guess that's my personality, but I feel like freaking out about things doesn't necessarily get, the results that you need, and it's not productive.
Right.
But I do think I maintain a sense of calm. Sometimes it's a veneer, and I'm there's definitely stress. I think there's definitely stress, but I try to handle it in a calm way, and I think I am able to just kind of check off one thing at a time and not let everything snowball at once. And that's kind of my method of dealing with it all. I know that we have we have a great team, and we work really well together. So I think we all know our personalities. And I think even though I'm calm, I think they know when I'm freaking out. But I do keep...
So how do they know that? Like, I'm like, what do they see on your face? That it's like, oh no, she's freaking out now.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I can't answer that.
But I love that, because I do think that as a leader, when the chips are down, your team is looking for you to be the calming force, to think logically and go, okay, this is what we're going to do in this instance.
Right. And I think so. And I think there are always surprises. There's so many little details to put together to put out a magazine. And I think, it does take a lot of attention. And I think the sense of calm helps me.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Lorna Gross Enchanted Life and Style. And if you want to learn a little bit more about my interior design work, my travel experiences, my book, or speaking engagements, you can go to lornagross.com or connect with me on Instagram at Lorna Gross Designs.
Right. So we're talking about like this one strength that you have, to just kind of be calm under pressure. And I'm sure that there are other strengths that you have. Tell me, was there ever a time along this journey of yours that you had to say, you know what, in this moment, I have to own my own greatness and step up to the plate and execute and be fabulous?
I would say maybe at the time that I started, I didn't know, I didn't have a lot of contacts in the design industry. I had not done a shelter magazine before. I had not been in charge of a magazine before. And when the prior editor left, I basically had an issue to put out in a month and a half or so. And I didn't have any projects. I had to start really, really from scratch. And I think that was the moment where I said, like, it's sink or swim, and you're going to figure this out. We had some wonderful writers who had been with the magazine who kind of helped guide me, and I figured it out. And I just did a lot of networking and dove right in. And I think I realized that I knew more than I did, more than I thought I had, and that, getting to know designers, learning their stories, and doing my research and homework has helped me sort of become, an expert in design over all these years.
So right now, in my mind, I have this image of you, right? So you have a reserved demeanor, and I have this image right now of you like cold calling people, where you're picking up the phone and going, "Hi, I'm Sharon.
Right.
You got any projects?" And what were you doing? Like, how did that come about?
That's pretty much the story.
Really?
I think, luckily there were some organizations like, I think ASID, the American Society of Interior Designers, had just had their awards. So I called a couple of people who had won awards, and I really felt like it was a cold call. I really felt like I was calling a rock star. I mean, you all are all rock stars to me. So that's how I got started, and a lot of photographers started bringing us projects, and we kind of expanded our coverage to areas and covering people who had never been in a magazine. So we kind of gave the magazine a whole new look and breadth and depth that continues today.
Yeah. So, and I agree with that, because when I peruse through the pages of the magazine, I think to myself, okay, this is very intentional. Like, these projects that are featured are very curated, and I've been fortunate enough to have been featured a number of times in the magazine. But are you looking for anything in particular? Like, is there a hallmark of design that you're looking for, you're seeking when you decide what you're going to feature in the magazine?
Right. Well, so many beautiful projects come our way, and it's amazing how talented our local design community is. And so often we'll get a project that's perfectly beautiful, but we're looking for some kind of spark or something that makes it different. So, with only 6 issues a year, sometimes projects that are perfectly beautiful that I would love to have or visit, as a home, might not have that extra something. It's hard to explain or put my finger on what it is, but it might be the art, the color scheme, sort of the combination of how the art, architecture, and interior design work together. The level of artwork, those kind of things.
Yeah.
That set it apart.
It's reminding me of what I share with my team often when we're designing, is that my philosophy is that when we design any space, it should be difficult to duplicate, right?
Right, exactly.
And have at least a few pieces or elements in it that are unique.
Right,
because
surprises.
we don't necessarily want to do cookie cutter.
Right, exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
So what do you think the general public is looking for when they seek out your magazine and pick up a copy of it?
So I like to think that we sort of have something for everyone. So we try to appeal to people and have homes that they can relate to and be inspired by, maybe for their, get ideas for their own homes or gardens, but also that are a little bit of a fantasy. So they're seeing how someone else lives. They're kind of imagining it sort of like an armchair traveler, what some very high-end homes might look like inside that they might not otherwise see. So kind of a combination. And I think what makes our magazine special as a regional magazine is also that it's attainable here. Like, we can all pick up magazines and see beautiful homes, national magazines, and see beautiful homes in Los Angeles or New York or the Australian outback or all over the world.
Right.
But these homes that we feature were attainable here. So from the exterior point of view, they make sense in our region. So it's a little bit more focused for their inspiration.
Yeah,
I think
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for you personally, we'll talk a little bit more about style and all that. So for you personally, is there a certain space in a home that you just get excited about featuring?
Right. Well, I happen to love to cook and eat and dine.
Well,
so
I like cooking, but I like to eat more than that.
Right. So I love kitchens. I love seeing creatively designed kitchens with a lot of features for real cooking. So when I visit a home, I also try to figure out, is this a kitchen that's really loved and used well, or is it just to have all the beautiful parts, but is it just something that people are not using as much? But I think I sort of, I have a perfectly fine kitchen, but I don't have a garage, appliance garages and baking stations. And all of those things are things I think, wow, that would be so cool. So I love to write about kitchens and see what people have done in their kitchens.
I find that interesting also to some degree that you said that you love to cook, because I know on the inside track
Right.
that there is a gelato business in your
Right.
family too,
That's
right?
true. That's true.
So who's doing most of the cooking in your home?
So I feel like maybe I'm like a closet food writer. I would love to write about food. My husband does most of the cooking, and he's such a good cook. He grew up. His mother was Italian, so he learned a lot from his Italian grandmother in Trieste, and he has a gelato company now. So he's he's fast, unfussy, but always a great cook. So he does most of the cooking, but I do like to cook, and I'm really the baker in the family. So when we need to have a good dessert, that's my job.
Yeah, it's kind of like people wind up being more the savory person or the sweet person,
Right.
don't
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about also that's been in my head, because there's so much conversation about Chat GPT
Yes.
and AI. And sometimes I find myself wondering what the future of design is going to be. Like, is the designer going to be replaced by technology?
Right.
Where do you think we're going in design? What do you think the future of design looks like?
It's interesting. I recently spoke to some designers and writers about that very subject. I mean, designers and architects. And I think that it might be a tool that people can use.
In what way you think?
Kind of maybe at the beginning of a project to help clients visualize potential, but I don't see it as replacing a designer or architect. I think it's such a personal thing to design a home, and it's hard to make for a machine, I think, to make all of the requirements work for what a client wants. And I know I have so much admiration for designers like you to kind of get to know a client and kind of pull out what is going to work for them. And maybe they can't articulate it exactly, but what responds to them and resonates with them, and both sort of emotionally and aesthetically, and also, physically. So
yeah, because I think the designer's responsibility when we're doing our job really well is to peel back all the layers of the client,
right,
and understand their essence, and then translate that essence to the built environment. Right?
Exactly.
So it's like sometimes I just wonder, can a machine do that?
Right. And I think that you're applying a lot of psychology there that a machine is not going to be able to do. So the machine might be able to draw the room to the right dimensions and figure out where a door or a window might need to be, but it's not going to make that interior that sings and makes that client feel happy in their home. I don't think
Or
a
even
machine
have
can do
that uniqueness that you mentioned earlier, right?
Right.
Okay, so then let's talk about you specifically.
Yes.
Okay, you have all this responsibility at work. What do you do as a routine to make yourself have a beautiful life, or to balance things out?
I love to be in nature. And I think from my day to day, I like to walk and run and swim, and I go to Great Falls a lot. That's especially Great Falls, actually like the C&O Canal here in Maryland. Yeah, so that's not far from my home, and I go there, especially during COVID. When I couldn't go to the gym, I would go there quite frequently, a few times a week. And I feel like after the stress of a day, you just breathe the air and see the scenery. And, I either walk or have a run along the canal, and just all of that stress just melts away. Yeah. And any time of year, it's beautiful. And we go to different entrances, so it looks different. So even though we're going to the same park, it's so large that it's wonderful. This time of year, there are all these fragrant blossoms. You can see the geese and their little goslings. Yes. And that's sort of my secret weapon of dealing with stress. So I love nature. I love traveling. I love going to museums and seeing wonderful art. So those are all kind of escapes that I love.
So now when you're traveling, where are you going? Are we going back to the Caribbean? Are we going somewhere else? Where are we going?
So we've been to the Caribbean. I've been to Puerto Rico a couple times over the past couple years, which is wonderful. It's an easy escape. Because I met my husband in Curacao, we still have very dear friends there. And so we go there. It's a big thing to go there at Christmas and New Year's time. So that is wonderful. Right. And it's like visiting family. So I'm so lucky that we have that. And then he still has some family in Italy. So we go over there pretty often too. And then our daughter's in California. So those are the places that I've traveled since COVID hit and we sort of stopped for a while.
So you were just mentioning getting together with your family. And then earlier you said one of the things that brought you the most joy when you were younger was gathering together with your friends. And you're aware that I'm writing a book on entertaining and tabletop design. And I love bringing people together, especially over great food and conversation.
Right.
So I am also aware that home and design is really lovely about hosting events for the design community so that we have an opportunity to connect. What do you think are the critical elements that create great gatherings for people?
I think in the home, it's such an authentic way to welcome people. And it's just, I think, a lot more meaningful to invite people into your home. And it's just such a relaxed setting. And I think good food and drink is wonderful. And just kind of creating a setting where people can relax, whether it's inside or outside. I think those are really wonderful ingredients. And I think homemade foods and drinks, I think our style is kind of casual. We don't try to make it too formal or fussy, but just sort of genuine and relaxed. But I know you are a wonderful host, and I have so much admiration for designers who create beautiful tabletops. So I try that, but I'm not a professional at doing that. But I do try to put out some nice flowers or something that sort of sparks, the joy of the season, whether it's something from our yard or something that I pick up.
Yeah.
And, we have some nice linens and stuff. So I do try.
I think that, it relates to me to what you were mentioning earlier is just having that uniqueness, right? So, like I'm hosting an event this afternoon.
Right. Right.
And I don't really have time to cook a whole lot, right? But what I know is that if there is one dish that I make, that makes it special. Like people appreciate that because you're putting your love into that dish.
Right.
And then my other secret is, for all entertaining, is to use name cards whenever I can.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because people just want to they want to feel as if they're valued. Right. And they want to feel as if they're appreciated and noticed and important to you.
Right.
So that's my other secret.
I love that. Yeah. And we have done name cards. And when our kids were little, sometimes during the day when I was trying to get ready for a dinner party, that would be their project to make the name tags. And
fabulous.
They had fun with that.
Free labor.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's see. You mentioned a number of things. One of them that's resonating with me so much right now is leading with kindness. Love that. But as we kind of wrap up and we think about like what it takes to create an enchanted life, like what would you say are the 2 or 3 things that you would recommend for people to consider to create an enchanted life for themselves?
I would say nurturing relationships. So having companionship.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah. I think whether it's a romantic partner or family or close friends to, nurture those relationships and try to see people when you can and spend quality time with them. And I think we all thrive together. And I think those relationships are what, carry us. So that's really important to me. I would say laughter. So that's part of those, I think when times are tough, I think laughter is the best medicine, whether it's being with friends and family that can make you laugh or seeing the humor in situations or going to comedy clubs or watching silly movies. I think laughter is really important.
Because it is kind of like a release, isn't it?
It totally is. Yeah. And then I feel like just appreciating the beauty all around us. I think that whether it's in nature or art or architecture or design, I think just stopping to look around and see how beautiful the world is. And I think those are like the ways that I sort of find happiness and enchantment in my life.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to what you were sharing about you going to Great Falls and being outside, right? Because I think that, life has so many to-dos. We're checking so many boxes all the time that it's almost like we have to be conscious and intentional about appreciating the beauty.
Right.
Don't you think?
Right. And it sounds very simple to just go take a walk, but I think that's, a really powerful thing to do. So
yeah. Well, Sharon, thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you,
so
Lorna.
great to
You
learn
are
more about you.
amazing. You know, I'm usually on the other side of the interviewer microphone, but you are a
Turntables
natural.
on you
You are a
today.
natural at this.
Well, thank you. I love talking
You
to you.
can add journalist to your titles, to your many talents.
I'll be thinking about that. But I so appreciate it.
thank
It's
you.
always great talking to you. And as I said, I have observed you. I have learned from you about, how to be a great leader, and you inspire me. So I so appreciate it. And your magazine also inspires so many people because it is aspirational. And I love the fantasy that you said that you're bringing to it.
Well, thank you so much. It was my honor.
You're welcome. It is my pleasure. And we both know that to create a beautiful life, you have to be able to take the twists and turns of it.
That's right.
And so I believe that life is a fairy tale. You make it.
I agree.
Till next time, I'm Lorna Gross, wishing you an enchanted life and style.